Welcome everyone to Asset Strategy Consultants Thought Leadership Series. I'm Keaton Makeit. Today we'll be discussing the decumulation phase with employee retirement challenges and retirement income solutions. We have a great opportunity to work with SMEs and subject matter experts in this space, both from BlackRock and Transamerica. The way that this panel is going to work is we'll start with some introductions. I'll do some housekeeping, and then we'll really talk about 5 key areas. We found that in the past for these thought leadership series that conversation and flow works better between the panelists. I've worked with the gentlemen today over the past few weeks. They are extremely knowledgeable in this area, so I think it'll flow very well. We have some supporting documents and slides to point to. And with that, the one housekeeping item I will say is, I'm guilty of this myself, is the financial alphabet soup we tend to rattle off in these panels. So I will try to, if I hear any QDIAs or ESGs or anything like that, I'll slow the conversation down, since we have a lot of non-financial folks on the call, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page and understands the terminology that we're discussing. So with that, before we jump into the regulatory environment of the Secure Act, we'll do some introductions. Let's start with BlackRock. Zach, could I have you introduce yourself and your role at BlackRock, and then we'll jump to Nick and then transition over to Transamerica.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Keaton, and good to see everybody. My name is Zach Frederick with BlackRock. I'm a defined contribution consultant covering the Mid-Atlantic, and I work with advisors, consultants, and plan sponsors across really 8 states in the Mid-Atlantic.
Thanks, Zach, and thanks, Keaton. Nick Nafusi. I oversee the target date fund franchise at BlackRock and run a group called Retirement Solutions, which builds a lot of these products.
Yeah, I'll go next. Matt Kohlrus from Transamerica, lead product manager, and working on some initiatives to launch some more in-plan income products and help with some participant journeys as well.
Lastly, Mark Fearson. I lead our product development group in Transamerica's Workplace Solutions division. Workplace Solutions here at Transamerica encompasses 3 main businesses: our retirement record keeping business, our voluntary benefits business, and our stable value investment shop. Thanks for having us here today.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for being here. I'm Keaton Makeit, an investment advisor, fiduciary, and consultant for Asset Strategy Consultants. Our mission is to be a leading independent provider of unbiased investment and advisory education to institutions and families. Again, this is our thought leadership series, and we're very happy to have everyone here. Helen, if you could just go to the next slide. What we're going to do is we're going to kick off the regulatory environment of the Secure Act of 2019. And if you just flip to the following slide, what this really does is it provides some background and context for the conversation this morning. So the Secure Act was signed into law of December 2019, and without getting too technical, it's really optimized the landscape for retirement plans. It's beefed up the annuity selection safe harbor aspect of retirement plans. It's allowed some movability or portability when it comes to the design of some of the income products that exist in retirement plans, and it's really provided a relief from a fiduciary liability standpoint. And also kind of the key important information aspect about passing this is it's given plan participants a new insight into what type of retirement income they're supposed to expect when they hit that retirement finish line. So it's really changed the landscape of how retirement plans are being looked at, and has really optimized our conversation when we sit down with plan sponsors. So if you go to the next slide, what we're going to anticipate happening here in the next few months is what the industry is deemed as Secure 2.0, and it's essentially the second leg of the Secure Act. The bill has passed the House in nearly unanimous vote of approval, and if we can extrapolate what the rest of the year is going to bring, we anticipate the Senate's likely to pass a similar bill, and it's going to lead to a final version of this passing. And similar to what the Secure Act did in 2019, this is really going to revolutionize even further what the retirement plan outlook is going to be. including some required minimum distribution ages increasing, automatic enrollment being mandatory with auto escalation up to 10%, some modifications on catch-up contributions, as well as a student loan match program, and particular rules around withdrawals for domestic abuse survivors, as well as a formation of a Department of Labor lost and found database. So at least on our end, for the folks who are on the panel, these are exciting changes in the world of the retirement plan space. The reason why these thought leadership panels are so important, in our opinion, is that most people have not dusted off the cobwebs from the pre-COVID era when they're talking about retirement plan design, and they're taking place from the same playbook that they were in 2018. As legislation change, regulations update, and the plan design evolves over time, it's absolutely paramount that plan sponsors start thinking about and being proactive with plan design when it comes to retirement plans. So Helen, if you go to the next slide, we'll open up the panel and just say very generally, can we talk about what the Secure Act has done, and how firms like BlackRock and Transamerica are kind of navigating the legislative and regulatory changes in the industry?
Yeah, we've seen really the concept of income kind of come full circle over the last 100 years. We started with pensions all the way back to the late 19th century, just as a way to really provide employees just a portion of their income in retirement. That's all it really was a portion. And this just really expanded, obviously, in the marketplace for the next 40 years afterwards. And we moved to kind of this defined benefit era, where it really was income replacement, and plan sponsors were taking kind of a head-on role with that with their employees. And then we kind of move as product development kind of shifts. A lot of employees are realizing they really didn't have much control over their accumulation, over their investment, over their payout. And one of the benefits of defined benefit plans was actually help them leave the marketplace, so they kind of knew when to actually retire. But we actually moved into this defined contribution era with legislation in the 1970s, and really product development at that point around that legislation kind of focused on 401k plans, IRAs, easy investing options, TDS, model portfolios. This is basically the next 30 to 40 years after that legislation. And as that's happening, really pension plans kind of left the marketplace. Annuity options did as well, even though a lot of plans still had an in-plan annuity option on the books. There just wasn't much adoption in them anymore. Because really, I don't want to say it was a lot of kind of greed in the marketplace, but the focus was on accumulation. And so this kind of reached a crescendo really in the early 2000s. And we had a couple kind of dips in the market that really kind of reset where we are from an income perspective and where we are from kind of product managers and product developers in terms of kind of solving this issue. We had the tech bubble crash of the early 2000s, and then the Great Recession in 2007, 2008. And so we saw accumulations kind of really wiped away. And along with that, a lot of our plan participants and plan sponsors realized that there was no kind of income backstop for a lot of employees. And so kind of coming out of that, we've kind of moved into the Secure Act era. And really before the Secure Act, though, we started kind of developing more products again. So a lot of annuity options, individual solution options that most insurers had on the shelf for kind of repackaged for plan sponsors and group contracts. But with that, we saw some pitfalls. They were expensive, complicated, still low adoption, but they were options. And so I think as plan sponsors kind of saw those options kind of hit the marketplace again, annuities kind of gained a little bit more popularity, and the idea of a guaranteed income stream was seen as definitely more of a benefit and almost kind of table stakes for plan participants at that point. And then we kind of move into Secure Act, and like Keaton said, really it kind of opened up, I think from a development standpoint, just more options for us to kind of put out into the marketplace. And what we've seen is kind of this shift back towards income as again, kind of being table stakes, hopefully for plan sponsors and for participants as they're going through a plan menu to know that there is an option there where they can start to kind of build out. And we'll talk about this later on, kind of shortening that income gap as they move into retirement. And I think where we are as a result of the Secure Act is it's really kind of given us more freedom to kind of develop easy one-step investing options, wrapping TDFs with annuity income in the glide path, merging guaranteed income with managed advice. So just a lot of possibilities here going forward.
That's great, Matt. Thank you. Are you seeing something similar at BlackRock?
Yeah, I think there's a similar arch. I don't think the Secure Act is really the impetus for a lot of this. I think to Matt's point, we've seen this as an industry for a while, that this has been a big issue. If I'll kind of paint a slightly different picture, very similar to what Matt had said, though, the Secure Act is just acknowledging that the market needs to evolve. What the Secure Act is doing is probably it's lagging what the innovation is doing, but what the Secure Act importantly is doing is signaling to the market, similar to what PPA did in 2006, that the 401k plans or 401k type plans are going to be the primary driver, and there's some regulatory support, some regulatory relief that can help drive this. So I think of 401k plans pre and post PPA, target date funds were here, but what PPA did is it put target date funds as the qualified default in plans. It set up the auto enrollment and the auto escalation. And no, we're not supposed to talk about jargon here, Keaton. So PPA is the Pension Protection Act. This was in 2006. This is what really got, if anybody that wants to read the work, Richard Thaler's work was really important in this. He won a Nobel Prize a couple of years ago for the work that he did around the nudges. The book is called Nudges. But what that really did is it encouraged people to accumulate in 401k plans. Now what we're seeing is we've seen great accumulation post 2006, pretty much across cohorts. And that's really due to the professionalization of management in 401k plans. Prior to 2006, you were likely defaulted into a money market fund and then stayed there oftentimes. Didn't increase your rates. You had to really know somebody, kind of talk to your brother-in-law or your mom would help you out with your 401k plan. What's happening now, though, is we've professionalized these plans. What the government is now recognizing is, while we've accumulated wealth, we haven't really turned these into proper retirement vehicles. And I think from what Matthew's saying, it's the same view that we have. Even right now, if I think about the work that we're doing, if you had the embedded guarantee into your target date fund, the last 20% drawdown in the market would feel much different. And whether we incorporate that in terms of an asset or in terms of an income number in retirement, it's a different outcome. So it's about recalibrating people away from this idea of an asset-only approach, now start thinking about an income approach. But to be clear, Keaton, the Secure Act is important, but it's not what's been driving this. The market has been driving this. The government is now helping us put some wind at our back.
That's great, Matt, Nick. That's really good clarity on the Secure Act, and thank you for help setting the stage. The really interesting word that both of you used was accumulation, as you were explaining different positions at your companies. Helen, if you go to the next slide, that actually plays very well right into our next topic, and that's what's known as the decumulation phase and challenges facing employees. So, Nick, I believe that you said, advisors, consultants have done a good job of really hitting that accumulation. Hey, plan, save, budget, invest for retirement. And the key issue that we are seeing with boots on the ground is that plan participants, employees in their 60s, hit that benchmark. They cross the finish line. They've been saving their entire life, every 2 weeks, direct deposit. And now all of a sudden they retire, they get a lump sum of money. They're not really sure what to do. It's completely disruptive when when you speak about a behavioral finance outlook. So if you could just go to the next slide. If you could, I believe maybe BlackRock will speak on the decumulation phase and kind of what the experience has been historically in regard to addressing this key issue when a plan participant hits retirement.
Yeah, thanks, Keaton. I think the points that were made earlier around accumulation, they're spot on, right? I think we've done a really good job of helping people save money, the auto features, the vehicles, done a great job there. But then when people get to retirement, there's not a lot for them. And what this slide is showing everyone is pretty intuitive, right? Not that many people have experience managing large sums of money. And those that have experience managing large sums of money, you don't know what their expertise level is. And so just the quality of that management is in question as well, right? And towards the bottom, what it's really pointing to is that people prefer a regular income stream, whether that's weekly, whether that's monthly. They would prefer regular income, but the most common way when people retire that they receive money is a lump sum distribution. And it leaves them kind of limited and confused and with a large challenge of how do I actually spend down these assets, or what do I do with this? And we ran a study recently that showed that people that have $30,000, $300,000, or $3 million at retirement, 20 years into retirement, have about the exact same account balance. What that tells you is there's a huge fear of running out of money for very good reason. People aren't really sure what to do, and so they feel comfortable spending whatever that money makes, but they don't want to touch the principal. And that is absolutely fine if you're spending very little, or if you have a very large account balance and the market's doing well. But the reality for most people is that their standard of living and what they're getting from Social Security leaves a pretty meaningful gap. And the income off of a $30,000 or a $300,000 or a $3 million portfolio is not generating enough on a consistent basis to close that gap to maintain the lifestyle. And so there's a need to intelligently spend down those assets and spend some of that principal, or convert it into regular income. And that's where our industry needs to help, and that's what the industry is doing. We're moving that direction. We've kind of solved the accumulation. Now I think we're really getting towards solving the decumulation aspect. But Nick, I'm sure you have a few additional comments on this slide and topic as well.
Yeah, Zach, I'll be brief on this. I would say empirically we know how to solve this problem. We haven't conditioned, or using Thaler's words, nudged people into how to solve the problem. So the answer is, at the point of retirement, you have three objectives. You want to maximize the amount you can spend, you want to minimize the variability of spending, and you want to address longevity. Those are the 3 points you want to make. Target date funds, BlackRock's, I run BlackRock's target date fund. It is built to do those 3 things. The problem is it's not a very easy way. Now, going back to the Secure Act, what you mentioned earlier, the problem we run into, particularly with people at retirement, is they have something called the lottery effect. They get to the point of retirement, they have $500,000, $250,000, $1 million, whatever that number is. They don't know what to do with that money, and they feel rich with that money, and they anchor to that number. That's what Zach was talking about. 20 years into retirement, they still have 80% of that wealth because they don't know what to do with it. There's a very simple provision in the Secure Act, and one thing they're going to have us starting to do, we've been doing this already, but they're going to start converting those numbers into what does retirement income mean. So how does that number actually convert into a retirement income number? So instead of saying I have $500,000, what we want them to start thinking about is you have $50,000 a year, $60,000 a year, whatever that number is, in retirement income. And what that'll do, hopefully, is just like the accumulation helped out, we're going to nudge people into understanding how to anchor to a spending number, not to an asset value number. This doesn't even get into the point of whether or not you want an annuity or you don't want an annuity, but it's just understanding how to spend your assets in retirement.
That's great. Thanks, Zach, and thanks, Nick, for that. You're absolutely right. I really don't like the cliche, but people really don't know what they don't know, and the lottery effect is very real. They see that more money than they've probably ever seen in their entire life when they retire, and they're very puzzled on what to do. And the key issue that the 5 of us try to address is, if you go to the next slide, how to limit variability and decrease some of the risks. Now, we'll talk about the first bullet point, longevity risk, in a second, but we start to address with plan participants and plan sponsors to help educate plan participants things they're not thinking of, such as death of a spouse, spending down savings too rapidly, or on large discretionary items. For whatever reason, it seems to be trending towards the RV or the truck or the Corvette when they hit that finish line in retirement. But what we want to try to do is preserve assets. We want to create an income stream, and we want to educate plan participants and plan sponsors on what options exist when it comes to retirement plan design. So Helen, if you go to the next slide, please, what we'll be able to do is talk about longevity and why it's a major risk for retirees. Let's see, Nick, is this one of your key slides?
Yeah, we can take this one. Zach, is there anything you want to say, or do you want to start out on this one, Zach?
Yeah, I'll make just a few comments on this. You can see the headline, right? Longevity is a major risk for retirees, and it's interesting because it's a blessing to live longer, right? That's a good thing. People are living a lot longer, but it poses a real financial risk in terms of outliving your money, and that's the fear of every retiree. They want to live as long as possible, but there is a legitimate fear of outliving those assets. And I think some of this research is great because it puts it in really good perspective. If you look at someone age 65 today, men have a 33% chance of living until age 90. Women have a 44% chance of living until age 90, almost 1 in 2 women. And so that risk and that feeling of outliving is real, and you can see it here. I think another fascinating number is if you take a couple age 65 today, there's a 1 in 4 chance that they will live to be 94 years old. And these are 65-year-olds today. And so if you think about someone who's 55 or 45 or 35, by the time they reach age 65, these are going to be pushed even further out. And so people are living longer. And then if you look at the other side of the screen, people are retiring earlier than expected. And I run into it all the time in the real world where people want to work longer. They want to work until they're 70 or whatever age, or they have, I don't know if they want to, right, but they have the intention to. And that's fine if you're a doctor or a lawyer in a certain profession, but for labor-intensive workforces, it's a much different reality. I think about my father-in-law. He's 65 years old. He works in a Kohl's warehouse, and it's very labor-intensive. His plan is to work until 70, and I hope he's able to. But recently, he's been having issues with his hands. He's had to get a few different surgeries, and so his reality may be different from his goal. And you see that happening very often. And so if people are kind of forced to retire earlier due to health issues, but then living longer, right, there's this large gap that needs to be solved for. And it's something that we're trying to solve in the industry. Nick, feel free to add anything.
No, nothing really to add, Keaton.
No, that's great. Longevity is a huge risk that we're working to try to address. And when issues present themselves in the marketplace, what we try to do is figure out some goals. Helen, if you could go to the next slide, what we'd like to try to do is talk about some wealth goals, the categories, and kind of how that works in with income products in the industry. Matt, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, sure. And along with kind of solving that longevity risk, we also want to solve, the risk of participants not actually planning for this in the first place, and really develop products to kind of merge with their life cycle goals. Here we just have a timeline of kind of a general investor and what their goals look like at different stages in their life. And as the timeline proceeds, goals will change. Of course, from a product standpoint, we need to, again, kind of merge goals as they kind of move along with this lifestyle. So as they kind of move through the early years, are obviously trying to max out contributions, build up that accumulation again. But we do need to get to a point where we do kind of get in their heads and get their up in front, especially with the DOL change that Nick alluded to, in terms of actually presenting what their accumulation will provide as income as early as possible, and start to kind of line in that income with their products as they move closer to retirement. And when they see the finish line between 10, 15, 20 years from where they are today. So kind of, again, lining in annuity with a TDF, or starting to kind of personalize managed advice products with an income goal in mind. So along with their accumulation, we are kind of narrowing the income gap again with products in the marketplace today. And of course, once they do kind of move into retirement, to kind of speak again with longevity and with the lottery effect, participants are going to face a number of different competing goals. They want that steady stream of income, keep the lights on, but also are constantly worried about not outliving their assets. At the same time, they want to travel. The first, 5 to 10 years of retirement can have a high level of variance in terms of the income needs in that time frame. They've worked their whole lives. They want to enjoy themselves, but at the same time, they're also holding on to the fact they don't want to outlive their income. So really what we need to do is, with a number of different product strategies, give them a steady stream of income, provide them with flexibility, but also kind of come up with some other decumulation strategies as well. And I know, Mark, you had some points you want to make on that.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'll just jump in. I thought that was well said. I think really what the industry and we've been focusing on is trying to ensure that we're thinking of the right chassis, that we're delivering that income component ultimately to the participants. And Matt mentioned a couple of times, both on this slide as well as on the earlier timeline slide, about managed advice or managed accounts, as well as target date funds. Frankly, products that participants know well, they're comfortable with. When you start to look in the deaccumulation phase and that income component, Typically, the connotation or the thought that comes to mind in both participant and plan sponsors' minds would be an annuity piece. There's always there's an old saying out there in the retail space that no one necessarily wakes up in the morning looking to buy an annuity. They're typically sold an annuity. When you come into the institutional in-plan space in the context of defined contribution plans, you can even expand upon that. The typical 401k investor, they expect a certain type of product. And, for things like managed advice that provides more holistic advice, bringing into account things like participants' outside accounts, spousal savings, Social Security expectations, tax jurisdictions, to optimize really what both in the accumulation phase as well as in this deaccumulation income phase, and then building the income as a component of that, and the managed account or the target date fund on an age-based standpoint being the chassis to deliver that. I think gives a certain level of comfort to the participant as they move through these very different stages that you see through the life cycle.
Yeah, I think that's right, Mark. One of the key issues we're trying to address is the education aspect of this, right? Getting in front of plan participants, doing one-on-one education or doing large group educations to help people start thinking about these issues in a real way. If we go to the next slide, I like to use the kind of wants in retirement versus needs in retirement. So you kind of think of your core base, housing, transportation, healthcare, food. You want to keep the lights on, you want to feed your family, you want to make sure you're safe and taken care of. Can the panel just talk about the difference between wants and needs and kind of break down the bar graph that we're looking at? And then quickly after this, we can take a look at the following slide in regard to actually solving that income gap and getting plan participants to start thinking about that.
Yeah, Keaton, I'll pick this one up. So I would say we picked up essential spending, and there's actually a second chart that goes along with this if we spend more time, which is it's a spending curve and how the spending evolves. What you tend to see is the housing, transportation, healthcare, and food stay fairly constant, if not go up slightly over time. The discretionary spending is what you tend to spend more on earlier in your retirement. And what we're always trying to figure out is how do we avoid poverty, frankly, for retirees. Now, Social Security has done an incredibly good job at avoiding poverty for those workers. But we're really interested in now, not only thinking about longevity, but also thinking about how this spending evolves over time. So Social Security, importantly, does have a COLA pass-through. It's going to directly pass through CPIW, which is important. But when we're thinking about this spending gap and kind of the prelude to the next slide, just spending on the essential amount of money isn't good enough. I don't think most people say, man, I've worked my whole life. I hope I can just not be poor. Like, we've got to be able to do better than that. So I think that's what we're trying to show when we look at what those numbers are and what's essential versus discretionary spending. As I said earlier, discretionary spending tends to be higher in the early years when you have the ability to travel, you want to see the grandkids, you want to do that type of work, and then it changes over time. And then health insurance or health care is a completely different issue, which we would probably spend an entire seminar talking through the healthcare expenses.
That's great, Nick. Thank you. If we just go to the next slide, again, our goal for this panel is there's an issue. We know there's an issue. We've done studies. We've talked to plan sponsors. Plan sponsors have told us that there needs to be a solution in the industry. I mean, the question I'll pose is, how can 401k plans help? What is the optimal solution here? This goes into our next slide, which is, is there one solution? Are there multiple solutions? Can we just talk a little bit about some of the considerations of income in retirement plans and what direction should plan sponsors consider following?
Yeah, Keaton, I think this is one of mine again. If you can just go back to slide 14, because there's just an important point I want to make on slide 14 that I think summarizes everything that we have talked about so far on this, which is, look, talking my own book here, BlackRock sells target date funds, but you can put managed advice in this. So include target date funds, include managed accounts. We see the data. People are better off with managed products than on their own. That is almost unquestionable when we look at the data cross-sectionally. There's always the individual person that knew when to buy tech at the bottom and now has sold it and bought energy at the top. But in aggregate, we find people in managed products, be it a managed account, an advisor or a target date fund, they tend to do better than people without. So that's the first point. We want to leverage what's working within these structures. The second point is include an income stream, and we'll talk about this in just a second, but that income stream is important, and let's include that income stream into the target date fund, or I should say, to make this a little bit more innocuous, into the managed advice platform. The reason why this is important is we don't ask people when they want to start buying inflation-protected bonds. We don't ask people when they want to start buying emerging market equities or start trimming emerging market equities. Why we would ask them when they want to start buying mortality credits or mortality alpha, I don't know why we would do that either. That is a much more complex question. So embedding this into their existing asset allocation and not separating these as two different decisions, this is what we describe at BlackRock as a whole portfolio decision. I should have a view on my insurance plus my liquid assets and my Social Security of how all of this is going to work together. And then finally, we underestimate this too. Keaton, you mentioned this earlier. We got to educate the hell out of people on this. And it's not through giving them books and articles. It's about building tools. It's about showing them the nudges. It's about getting them to do the right thing. Again, the third time I've referenced Thaler in this conversation, but it's about anchoring people to an income number, not to an asset balance. So if you take that into consideration, and then we think of page 16, there's a lot of different ways that we can do this. And I don't want to get too bogged down on this. I think Matthew or Mark is probably going to spend some time on this as well. But what I try to show here is there's a spectrum of different outcomes which you could have on this. Some of these are going to affect certain areas, others are not. So the big area that we're always concerned with in retirement is longevity. Really the only way you're going to solve longevity is through some sort of a pooled risk product. We would call that insurance. It's something to protect you against the probability you're going to outlive the average longevity table. So the income-oriented products don't do that. They just produce a higher yield. And one of the points I will say that as we've been going down on this journey, which has been really interesting, is the amount of people that have an aversion to spending their money. So the income products have gotten popular is you can say, well, it's a higher yielding product. But in reality, you don't save to create a nest egg and then live off of the income. You have to spend the money, or your savings rates are going to have to be about 40 or 50% throughout your lifetime. So you're basically saving the assets to create an annuity for yourselves and then drawing down those assets. And then as you move further down the list, target date fund with a spending strategy. These are called managed payout funds oftentimes. A lot of managed accounts will have these types of funds. You then have the actual managed payout fund. So the target date with the spending strategy is similar to a managed payout, and you kind of see how we're moving along the spectrum of becoming more precise in what we do. You have the in-plan annuity, and then the target date fund with the variable annuity, which is probably the most complex and expensive on the list. But the idea is there's lots of different options. What I'd go back to is the first point that we made about decumulation. Decumulation is about how do I maximize the amount I can spend from my savings rate? How do I minimize the variability of that spending, because people don't like to have a lot of volatility month over month in their spending? And how do I address longevity? Longevity is the real wild card, because we don't know how long you're going to live, and that's why a pooled insurance product tends to make sense. So we're going to pool the risks just like you do with your homeowner's insurance, or your car insurance, or any other insurance you have. You're pooling the risk of longevity.
Thanks, Nick. In the panel's experience, has there been a slow uptake on these? If so, is it because of lack of education? Plan sponsors don't know what exists. They're not being talked to enough. There's reluctancy because they don't understand what the process is. Before we go to the next section, I think we'll just talk briefly about Annuity Solutions. What's going on in the industry, and what can we do to improve what's happening?
Yeah, I'll jump in, Keaton. I think historically, participant utilization has been low with some of these products. As Matt walked through the sort of timeline in products, these are complex, right? They're not, a little bit to Nick's commentary just now. Embedding the income stream or the product itself in solutions that participants understand, that they are frankly cost effective as to what they typically would view as a solution that they would see in a defined contribution plan, are absolutely critical. And as we continue to move forward with the Secure Act, and from a product development perspective, I think really that's what the industry is focused on, simplicity, to ensure that participants understand ultimately that the vehicle that they're investing their funds in and where that income would come through, cost effectiveness, that For example, if a guarantee is provided on 100% of the assets, and there's M&E or mortality expenses that are applied to those assets, and you're looking at potential ongoing annual expense charges in the 1 to 2% area, which is obviously not the participant expectation within a 401k plan for say an underlying passive target date fund or something along those lines. So I think by focusing on the simplicity, creating products and solutions that the everyday investor can understand and have faith as to the merits of what they're being provided and delivering in a cost-effective manner here moving forward will really help drive utilization, and that's what we expect to see going forward. But particularly as younger savers, millennial, Gen X, Z, et cetera, have less of a dependency on Social Security and defined benefit pensions as well.
Thanks, Mark. That's a great answer. But I love the word that you use, simplicity. I know that the industry as a whole has gotten very good at really diving into the weed and getting into the weeds and getting caught up on some of the complexities of what is available in the marketplace. If we could just go to the next slide and then the slide following, I believe that we're going to try to break down and make this idea of an income stream within a retirement plan as simple as possible, and just talk about some of the historical common challenges with traditional annuity and how that's evolved. Matt, is this something that you'd like to talk about, or is this a BlackRock start?
This is a BlackRock slide, but it kind of plays into the next slide that follows this, about just kind of some of the challenges we've seen in the marketplace around annuities, some of the misperceptions, but they're generally seen as being expensive, obviously illiquid. There's been a lot of resistance, really because of just bad PR. There are a lot of cheap annuities out there in the marketplace today. And I think what we found recently with the way to kind of embed these into target date funds, into managed advice portfolios, it does kind of take away a lot of the upfront costs to participants. I think part of the issue, honestly, is some of just what participants don't see or have access to, and kind of go back to one of Nick's points about kind of anchoring participants to an income amount versus an accumulation amount. I think annuities are always seen as something that you're surrendering your accumulation to. If we can kind of start to show participants the value of their accumulation as income as early as possible, I think that's going to help with the uptick and adoption of these products, I think both for plans and also participants. And I think really also kind of breaking down barriers that a lot of participants don't even see, that they're not even aware of. So like I have a little bit of a digital background, and I'm also, I'm in my early 40s now. And so I'm really in the back end of kind of my working years. I've really hopefully have just 20 years or so left. There's no reason why I shouldn't be thinking about income now. But if I log into my account, there are certain pieces of the website with my former plans that I don't have access to because it's being suppressed because it's just kind of tiered. All of our digital product management basically tiers off participants based on age and what they can see, what tools are going to be readily available to them. So I think that's something that we need to kind of break down for participants and really kind of just pull the curtain back. So if they want to start thinking about income at the age of 40, 42, they can, and they can have just easier access to those easier solutions versus what they might have today.
Thanks, Matt. If we just go to the next slide, can we talk a little bit about some of the solutions developed around the Secure Act passing and what options actually exist for plan sponsors, and then kind of the solutions that we can start talking to plan participants about as plan sponsors want to optimize their plan in the post-COVID world.
Yeah, and this is one that was really launched really kind of post-Great Recession and great numbers and around the Secure Act as well. And I know a lot of product development across insurers really ramped up with this particular product after the Secure Act passed, but also kind of speaks to some of the issues that we've seen in terms of complexity, expense, just a really low adoption. And I think it's a product that has a lot of interesting features, but it's just one that I think we can really learn from as we develop kind of more robust and really simpler income products going forward. So kind of again, this was a common design in the marketplace. It's one that's out there in great numbers today, a number of different options, but they're all relatively the same. At their core, the idea here is around just kind of developing that income base, creating a foundation for lifetime income for participants. And so each year we're going to lock in the income base. We're going to compare the income base from the previous year to what the current market value is of the underlying investment, which in many cases can actually be a target date fund or just a balanced portfolio account, and then reset to the higher of those figures. So the theory is, as the market tends to go up every single year, you're going to lock in those gains. If it goes down, like the situation we're in right now for a long period of time, you're not going to actually lose any value. So in that respect, it's great. And then there's this kind of low variance scenario where it does pay off very well. But the kind of flip side of that is, again, kind of what I just explained, that can be seen as being quite complicated. It's hard to explain to a participant. It's hard to visualize to a participant in an easy way. And it's also expensive. The insurance with this comes usually between 90 to 100 basis points. And there's also been some kind of shifts and development with these products over the years from some insurers, where we're actually capping out the income base with some of them at $2 million. And we're actually reducing the amount of step-ups that a lot of participants get. The way these were kind of launched initially, everyone kind of saw this annual step-up. We're now moving to products that only step up once, or once or twice, usually either at age 60 or age 65, or actually at income activation. So in those scenarios, actually, you're paying the expense. You're actually not getting the benefit of locking in the income base outside of just protecting your contributions. So there's definitely some risk there. And then really what we get to is kind of the idea of avoiding, as Nick phrased it earlier, poverty in retirement. So what we usually see in the early years of retirement is the need for a lot more income than you're going to see between the ages of 70 and 80. Or 80 to 85. And if you do start to, with these products, draw out additional distributions, you're going to see some variance in future years. So you're not going to feel that pain initially, but when you do head in those later years in retirement, if you started taking out more than your guaranteed income amount was slotted for you based on your income base at retirement, it's going to draw down your income base slowly over time. As a participant, you might not really be seeing that. And then, when you get into your, late 70s, early 80s, you're seeing a reduced income amount that's still guaranteed, but your previous actions in retirement are affecting the potential longevity. So again, this is something that was kind of built as a way to potentially kind of narrow that income gap. But if you don't use it properly, and you use it a little bit, very early on in retirement, you are actually going to widen your income gap later on in retirement. But again, this kind of brings us back to where we are in product development. We know we need more low cost products that can yield that guaranteed income, but also a simple version of this that we can kind of, again, there are lessons learned from this product that we can take as we move forward in development.
Thanks, Matt. I'll dig in really quick here before I close with advantages for plan sponsors. When we meet with plan sponsors and asset strategy consultants, one of the key questions we're getting is, all right, how do we actually implement this in our retirement plan? Is it someone clicking a button? Is it someone calling you up on the phone and saying, we need to implement this in our plan? Is it logging onto a website and checking a box? What is the actual, if I'm a plan participant, how do I actually do this if I think this is a good idea for me personally?
Nick, you want to take this one and talk about what we're doing with LifePath Paycheck?
Yeah, sure. I feel like I talked a lot, so I was trying to make sure nobody else wanted to say anything. But the way that we looked at this with a product that we're in the market with now called LifePath Paycheck is, and I've alluded to much of this earlier, is we're going to embed the annuity option into the target date fund. So what we did is we created if you actually jump back a slide, this was a BlackRock slide on page 18, what we want to do is overcome these challenges. So this is what we thought were the 6 challenges with annuities in general. First thing you think about annuities, you think they're expensive, they're liquid. The behavioral biases are people do not want to give up $100,000, $300,000 to get back a smaller check. It's hard to choose, it's hard to size, and they're hard to time. Basically, annuities are just big, long bond contracts is what an annuity works out to be. So what we got to do is we're going to figure out a way around this. What we did is we created a liquid deferred annuity. It hadn't existed prior to this. We created a liquid deferred annuity that you start buying while you're still accumulating wealth in your target date fund. The idea of doing this is we treat it as an asset class within the portfolio. So you're not making a lot of decisions. The only decision you have to make is whether or not you want to take the annuity. And then importantly, you can execute the annuity anytime between 59.5 and 72. It's only about 30% of the total portfolio, so you still have 70% of your assets completely liquid, even if you choose to annuitize. So what we want to do is provide a level of flexibility around when you can take the income, as well as there's a few different features on there to avoid some of the behavioral biases, so things like a 10-year period certain or a cash refund option. But the idea is just a very simple vanilla annuity that's going to provide that level of income well into retirement. It is liquid during accumulation. It's obviously illiquid once you've annuitized. BlackRock is choosing for you. We are the 338 on the selection and monitoring of the two insurance companies. BlackRock is sizing it for you as part of a total portfolio position, as we describe it at BlackRock, a whole portfolio approach. And then the timing, we're going to be dollar cost averaging into these units leading up to retirement. So you're not going to buy this at a single point in time. And Keaton, I think that's one of the big problems with the annuity purchases now, is that annuity purchase is a massive amount of money at a point in time. And if we haven't conditioned, or for the fourth time, nudged people into these types of purchases, they're going to have a shock when they see this. No different than if you're buying a house, buying a car, buying anything else, it's very expensive. And just simply put, just to frame this as simple as I can, if you said that you have $100,000 and you're going to buy an annuity, I give you two choices. Choice number one is I'll give you $100,000 cash that you already have. Choice number two is I'll give you $6,000 a year for the rest of your life. We know that most Americans facing that choice will choose the $100,000. This is what's called the lottery effect. We have to condition them from when they're in their early 50s, and I think, as Matt or Mark had said, we've got to do it even earlier than that, to start saying that actually that $6,000 a year is really beneficial because it's guaranteed every year, and you're going to get that no matter what, where the $100,000 will sit there. So those types of things we've got to start working in with the education.
That's great. Thank you for that. I know it's a little technical, but one of the questions we get is how does it actually work? How can we have interest in doing this? What can we do to move people forward with the solution, because the issue exists? So if we could just jump to slide 21, we'd like to close with our final point and talking about advantages for plan sponsors and looking ahead. And really, this has been mentioned a lot on the panel today. It's really about education, not only on the plan participant side, on the employee side, but also on the plan sponsor side. And it's really based around plan design. I started the event today earlier, kind of joking about knocking the cobwebs off of the retirement plan documents, and really talking about optimizing plan design. But it's really for the benefit of plan sponsors, right? It's helping to recruit, especially as the job market continues to be as complex as it is, and employers are fighting for great talent in what seems like a small pool. Whether we're talking about retention of key employees and making sure that other organizations aren't poaching their top workers, we need to work with plan sponsors to optimize their plan design to make sure that their benefits are superior. And quite candidly, it helps asset strategy consultants, helps plan sponsors prepare their employees for retirement and making sure that they retire on time. The last slide that we'll look at here is really advantages for plan sponsors in real terms. We know through talking with plan sponsors and looking at the data, being able to optimize plan design in this capacity really reduces financial stress on employees and ultimately boost productivity. It's also kind of interesting where employees do not extend their retirement dates. That really helps with employment costs and succession planning, being better managed if retirement is financially feasible for older workers. So I'll close with this before we get into the question and answer session. There's a lot of work, not only for the four of us on the call to do, but it's really incumbent on plan sponsors to think about what changes and options exist in order to better optimize their employees' retirement outlook. So it's incumbent on the plan sponsor to start thinking proactively about this. It's also incumbent on the plan participant to start thinking proactively about retirement and what options exist. And then, of course, the onus falls on us on the panel to do a good job of getting in front of people and continuing to talk about the solutions that exist for the issues in the retirement plan industry. So with that, if there are any questions or comments or any additional feedback that the four panelists want to provide, I'd like to try to bake in some time for that. Looks like you guys knocked it out of the park. Well, if there are no questions or concerns, yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for being part of the panel this afternoon. A lot of good insight, a lot of good commentary, and I think it's very helpful to continue to march the dialogue forward with plan sponsors. With that, again, I'd like to thank all the attendees for being part of the conversation today. Looks like everyone's information is listed on the screen. So if there are any follow-up questions that you'd like to direct to someone individually, please do that. If there's a general question in the future, please reach out to me or anyone at Asset Strategy Consultants, and we'd love to get in front of you to talk about some of the solutions that exist. With that, I think we'll close the panel. And again, thank you to everyone for their knowledge, time, and energy this morning and afternoon. Thanks again, and talk to everyone soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.